Thank you to everyone joining us tonight virtually from wherever you are with us at Chevalier's here in Los Angeles. We're the oldest independent bookstore in Los Angeles, and we are thrilled to continue to be able to do events via Zoom, even as various public health mandates keep changing. So thank you all for being with us in this way this evening, and we look forward to hopefully seeing people in person at the store soon. This evening, the event is recorded, so if you want to keep your camera off, that's fine, that's great. During the event, only David Ritz and Tommy Swerdlow will actually be visible, but during Q&A time, things like that, if it is a concern for you about being recorded and then being on our YouTube channel, please feel free to keep your video off. The format for this evening is this intro right now, followed by the actual conversation between Tommy and David. And then there will be a little time for questions from the audience. You are welcome to put questions in the chat as they occur to you. And when we get to the Q&A time, I will be picking questions out of the chat and relaying them. So you will have plenty of time to submit questions. And of course, if you want to wait until the Q&A period, you are welcome to do that as well. And then I think my last very important announcement is that you can buy Straight Dope by Tommy Swerdlow from Chevalier's. I'm going to put a link in the chat, and we also have plenty of copies available in the store. So if you are local to Los Angeles and want to avoid shipping times, you can come by and get a copy from us on Larchmont Boulevard. So that, I think, is the last of my very important announcements. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the people you're actually here to see this evening. So I will start with tonight's author, Tommy Swerdlow. He is a screenwriter. I personally got very excited when I realized he wrote Cool Runnings, as someone who has, I think, never failed to not cry at the end of that movie. And he has written several others, including Little Giants, also a youthful favorite. And he made his directorial debut with the feature 1,000 Junkies. And he is in conversation this evening with, here we go, David Ritz, who has written biographies of Aretha Franklin. He's ghostwritten. And again, I think terribly excitingly, he co-wrote or composed the song Sexual Healing with Marvin Gaye. So for any of you for whom that song is a favorite, you have David Ritz to thank. So thank you both to Tommy and David for being with us this evening, and I will leave it to you now.
All right, well, I'm going to start by testifying that I love the book, and my aim is to get everybody to purchase 10 copies of the book instantly. I love it for a lot of different reasons, and I'm going to give a quick overview of why it's so interesting to me, and then I'll start asking Tommy a bunch of things, and then we'll do a bunch of other things. But anyway, I was thinking of the jazz pianist Thelonious Monk playing the song Lulu's Back in Town. And that's what the book reminds me of, because the tune Lulu's Back in Town is a cliche. And it's sort of a worn out cliche, but somehow when you hear Monk does it, he funks it up and redoes it and brings out all the irony and the beauty and the complexity of it. And that's what Tommy does with this novel, because this novel is based on some of the most worn out cliches in American genre history, which is the detective novel and the Raymond Chandler template of the dead body and the Hollywood being a lonely, dusty place and so on and so forth. And Tommy embraces all the cliches. He doesn't ignore any of them. And yet somehow he imbues them with a kind of a passion and an irony and a humor and an intensity and a poetry, which is extraordinary. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so crazy about the book, is that you like the idea that it is a house built on cliches, and the way he plays with those cliches is, to me, endlessly enjoyable. So end of my testimony, and Tommy, you know what I would like you to do before you start talking, though, you know, and all those out there will soon understand, both Tommy and I both love to talk, and we're going to try to outtalk each other, so we'll see how that goes. But read, if you would, because this is the Call Me Ishmael moment. Read, if you would, the opening paragraph of the book, you know, so we can just have that.
Got it. Monk, huh? Pretty great, man.
Well, as good as I can do. I mean, beyond that.
All right. For years, the forecast had been no. No and windy, no and cloudy, no with a chance of showers. At times, it seemed the sun might break through, but it was always a hoax. And even when it did, it was that harsh, flat, smog-sick light that blasts you out and breaks you down to nothing. Los Angeles isn't for people. It's for lizards. Human beings weigh too much for this town, and the ground breaks away from under their feet. Some folks don't like that feeling and lurch to get their balance, but some have learned to love it and believe their footsteps actually change the shape of the earth. New York is different. It's built on granite and good taste, but LA is made of crumbling clay and whatever you can get away with. And for a while, I got away with it all. But then the weather changed and the barometric pressure grabbed me by the throat. I needed it to rain, but all it did was blow. A steady and relentless gale of no coming off the ocean and tearing down Wilshire Boulevard.
Well, there you go. So, I mean, to me, when I read that, I instantly kind of felt, well, this is a jazz novel, it's a blues novel, you're going to begin to blow, you're going to play chorus after chorus, you know, the groove, you kind of drop the groove, and there we go. But I got to ask you this. When you were thinking of this book, which is a very tight novel, you can read it in 2 hours, it's a couple hundred pages, did you always know you were going to do the Raymond Chandler cliche thing, or was that something you discovered afterwards? I mean, was
me and you, when me and David have some kind of mushbuka family connection, and then we actually met after my family had met him years ago. We had an early lunch, and you said you should write a book, just put everything in it.
I did.
Then Stanley, my son, had to read The Big Sleep for high school, and he couldn't get through it. And so Hani, who really helped me with the book, who's a part of the family and a great friend of Karen's, said, I read it, it's crap. I said, crap? I heard Chandler's amazing. Let me look at this thing. So I took the book and I read 5 pages, and I was like, oh, I get it. I think I can do it. I think I can lean on it and sort of lean on Chandler's rhythm and on these tropes to create. But the thing for me was I could write always. I can always catch what's going on with me, and sort of, I would do those check-ins and I could capture where I was at. But to be constantly plugging back into a mood where I could put it in one big container, I wasn't sure I could do it. So the Chandler thing gave me a mood and a vibe to lean on and a style. And then I was like, oh, maybe this can carry me through a whole book,
Yeah, and also I presume, tell me if you think I'm right, I also presume that your relationship to LA, and LA is probably, the sort of major character in the book, that you kind of, because Chandler is LA-ish, and and James Cain is Glendale and Hollywood, that you were attracted to that because you could put in all your LA stuff. Is that right, or did that happen by accident?
I mean, I'm glad he was from there. I mean, it was the LA help, but it was more the rhythm. But I like to say, like, I love LA. I think like only someone who's lived here 37 years but isn't from here can.
Right.
So it's like I'm incredibly familiar with it, but it's not how I feel about New York, where I have a very convoluted, difficult relationship with New York City. That's its own story. But LA, I don't. I just have a kind of fascination with it, coming here as a 21-year-old and just really exploring it in kind of all its catacombs.
Give us a brief, because I want to go back to the content of the book and how you hooked it up and everything. But give us a brief overview of your career as a writer before you came to this book.
I always wrote poems. Mm-hmm. And I was like in school, like I would be called on to like write poems for events. I was always, but I didn't take it. I couldn't really go to school. I didn't take it seriously. I didn't go to college. And I decided I'd become an actor because it just seemed easier to me to do that than to sort of have to write in any kind of legitimate, organized way. And then I was an actor for a while. And then I sort of, started writing poetry again. And I got a little bit of as much as you can have sort of a poetry following out here, but I wrote a play. I started a theater company and wrote a play. And the play was a 2-man play, and a friend of mine gave it to his buddy, a college buddy, to direct. And the college buddy looked at the play and said, Michael Goldberg, my friend who's passed away, my writing partner. And he said, this is pretty good. Why don't you make a real play out of it? And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, you got to make a story out of it. You got to, there's no tension, there's no whatever. And I realized oh, I can do one thing and you can do one thing. So I ended up getting into this relationship with Michael where I sort of was like a performing dog, where I would show up and write for 4 hours and go, here, look what I can do. And he'd take it and go home and read it and go, okay, we can do something with this. And we wrote, and Ezra, my late brother, got us to, back in the day, got us to some little bit of dough to write a movie, the first movie about my family, and CAA signed us. And then, we went around and we got this Jamaican bobsled movie and it was on, we wrote this Jamaican bobsled movie and it was a hit. And then all of a sudden I was a screenwriter, and I never thought of being a screenwriter. I didn't know about being a screenwriter, but I could, between me and Michael, we could kind of handle it.
Yeah. And that leads me to think about
one more thing. I'll tell you one more thing.
No, please.
When I did the movie Hamburger Hill, when I was 24 years old, I went to the Philippines for 16 weeks, and I wrote a novel in longhand. And I have serious dyslexia and learning disabilities, and handwriting is like a torture for me. And I sat on a bus and in longhand, that must have really mattered to me, wrote a book in a kind of military journal style, 500 hours. And I wrote an entire novel, and I didn't finish it, but I did have that impulse. So I always, it mattered to me to write, you know what I mean? And I think I didn't finish that book because I didn't imagine myself a novelist, but I wrote it, and it was long enough to be a novel, So that's part of the story too.
I was going to say that part of what's so intense about this book is that you really deal with 3 different cultures. One is the culture of addiction. The other is the culture of recovery. And the third is the culture of the Hollywood screenwriter. And in each case, it seems to me, the addict is looking to score. The recoverer is looking for peace of mind or, for freedom from his addiction. And of course, the screenwriter is looking for a gig. He's looking for bread. So and all of these 3 things of being addicted, of being in recovery, and chasing after a gig have been essential parts of your life. And it's the tension in the book, and you tell me if that's the tension you had when you were writing the book, is 1, will the addict use? 2, will the attic get recovered? And 3, will the screenwriter score? And your choice to infuse it with as much tension as possible seemed like you were drawing from those things with which you were most familiar. Is that right, or am I nuts?
Yeah, but when you when you went and read Junkie the other day, the Burroughs book, you talked to me about it. And you said that, I realized, oh, there was something good about not writing a book about I start clean, you know what I mean? So that made tension. I was thinking about that, yeah, but I wasn't writing with an outline, which is why it took me a long time. So I love the ratio of you can read it in 2 hours, and it took me 3.5 years to write it. That's like, a disaster, you know what I mean? Like, existential disaster. But to think that it could go that quickly. But I definitely, I see that was important. And I just thought, I always had the good tension I had was like, I'd be up in DreamWorks, like writing on Shrek when they first had this building, and I'd be driving down to the Pep Boys on Washington to score. And I just knew that, like, going from sitting with Spielberg to copying, I mean, I know Jerry Stahl wrote his book and everything, but I just knew there was something inherently interesting about that. But most of all, David, I just wanted, my great panic is that I'll be lying and that I won't be telling the truth. And so I wanted to write about things I knew. So I used people based a lot of it on people I knew, and then wrote it. But I just wanted to have some authority about what I was talking about.
Let's jump into the junkie culture, which you ain't with.
You want to read that part, or you want to talk?
Yeah. Go ahead and give us an idea of what we're getting into, the part of LA you're going to introduce us to, because this to me is sort of the heart of the book geographically.
It's been there like a peach pit just below my solar plexus ever since I talked to Claude. I knew I wasn't going to call or even make a decision about when to go. I'd just be driving on Beverly or 6th when the car would magically turn and I'd be headed down Vermont. Only this time, when I crossed Washington, I wouldn't turn onto the 10 and head for Alhambra and the pork fat safety of Sam Wu barbecue. No, I keep going, past Adams and down to King Boulevard and that golden bird on the corner that sends the smell of week-old grease into the disenfranchised air. And I was right. The car did magically turn. Only it wasn't 6th Street, it was 3rd, and I didn't take Vermont. I took Normandy. I hit Jefferson and glanced at the strip mall with the Ted's Burger. There used to be 2 callback payphones on the corner where I'd page Kenny Butler. I'd say, hey man, what's up? And he'd say, same, in a narcotized drawl that got me even higher than the dope. 10 minutes later, he'd swing by in a late 70s model Seville, either the maroon with the crooked grill or the pale yellow with the gray Bondo back door on the driver's side. He knew what a Pall Mall was, and his ash was as long as a Chinese king's pinky nail. I knew Kenny 3 years, and now he's dead 23, but he's still the coolest person I ever met by a mile. He was like a dad to me, a dad who sold strong white dope and drank Dr. Pepper in the can because it was colder than the bottle. I thought we'd be together forever, but the car accident changed all that. He nodded out on a stormy night and broadsided a semi at 50 miles an hour, going under the truck and ripping the entire roof of the maroon Seville clear off. He had too much methadone in him to die right there, but a year or so later, he was through. It was Kenny who introduced me to Robert Lee, Daffy, Big John, Honest John, Whiskey John, Crazy Jeannie, and Pete the Mailman. But it was Robert Lee who stuck.
You see, hearing that makes me want to change my entire overview of the book, which is now I see it I see it as a series of poems disguised as a Chandler novel. I mean, but any event, the hell with my interpretation. Let's keep on going because of this kind of poetry motif. the other geography, of course, everybody who reads the book will get a taste of this, but you go all over the place. You go to Malibu and mid Koreatown, and you're in love with LA, and you can't get enough of LA. And like I said, there are all these kind of landscape poems about LA. One of the paragraphs I love the most is when you meet the guy at Musso and Frank's in Hollywood. Go ahead and give us a little taste of that, please.
The sign for Musso and Frank's looms over Hollywood Boulevard like a neon speedball. The warm pink and cool green, reminding you that the world was a better place when men wore hats. It was Liam's idea to meet there. I had called him as soon as I got home. I was planning on playing it cool for a day or two, but it was useless. He had lit a fuse in my brain with that phone call, and it was going to burn until I saw him. I'd come in through the back, down 2 sets of 3 steps, through the swinging doors, and right into 1930. If the food was as good as the decor, I'd eat here every night. I head up the narrow aisle of the dimly lit room, looking out for Liam, hoping I'll recognize him with his clothes on. There's meat grilling on an open hearth to my left, but all you can smell is old wood and air conditioning. A wide Latino waiter with a head like a buffalo slips by in a scarlet waistcoat with black lapels. He's got a tray of charred flesh and fried potatoes growing out of his hand. If he knows your name, you've done something right in your life. Not everything, but something. I see an arm go into the air and pull at me. Liam's rusty mane comes into focus, burning through the dimness like an orange lamp.
You see, it's also, as I'm thinking about the book and I'm hearing you read and everything, it also seems to me that what the other thing that makes this book so unusual for a Chandler-esque noir novel is that it is essentially, and you tell me if you agree with this, it's a comedy. It's basically a funny book. Now, again, I don't know if we've chosen the hysterically funny passages, and maybe we're going to sort of misrepresent the book because I've chosen the most poetic passages.
Right.
But did you know that you were going to really write a comedy about the kind of darkest things you can imagine, which is sort of near-death dope addiction and people ODing?
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole idea of the dope movie we made. I mean, I always got that, like, and Cool Runnings was a good example. I mean, it's funny that the woman said, it made her cry, you know what I mean? But it was like, soften everybody up with jokes and then trick them into the depth, you know what I mean? Never lead with the depth, you know what I mean? So I would never write anything that wasn't basically a comedy, because I just laugh too much just in life, you know what I mean? I just, like, that's all I do is, I'm looking at people up on the screen thing. I was like, 4 people, I said, boy, I just laugh with. I mean, I don't do anything but just laugh. So I mean, that's like, it's hard for me to take anything too serious.
Yeah, but of course, the seriousness, for example, take the recovery culture, which takes up a lot of.
That's the funniest of all.
Right, and yet your equivocation about, or the the kind of you character,
right?
The guy, when I'll tell people who haven't read the book that Tommy has taken the guise of a screenwriter named Bobby Zorn, who is not a real detective, but is an out-of-work screenwriter who's out of bread and needs to gig up. And the only way he can gig up is someone pays him to solve a mystery, which involves everybody in AA. So your attitude about AA, and this is one of the other things that I love about the book, which is like Junkie, is that it isn't the days of wine and roses where you go to AA and you get cured and everybody's happy and you get your higher power and you live a lovely life. Your attitude about AA is or at least this character has sort of disdain and yet appreciation. So talk about how you sort of negotiated your relationship to 12-step recovery into this book.
Again, it was something I knew about and had my own take on. One of my, not one of my, there's a lot of lines I like in the book, fine, but one of the lines that really strikes me is as real in this book is when I go to that NA meeting and I try to explain the difference and I go, basically, AA went to college and NA went to prison. Right. And, and so I just, me and my friend TJ also, who actually runs a rehab, have a very love-hate kind of relationship. I mean, and with all the 12-step programs, just the idea of that many people in that much agreement is not good for me. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in that much agreement. It's just not going to work.
Exactly.
But it saved my life, and when but I had something happen to me, an illness. I mean, I went to meetings, never did a thing for me. I mean, AA taught me how to live. It did not get me clean. I had to be taken to like down in the jaws of death, which
you put in the novel.
Yeah.
Your character almost dies, right?
Yeah, I put a lot of real stuff in the novel and a lot of fake stuff. But but AA is a great, it's a great place, especially for junkies, because where else are you? First of all, where else do people sort of go to you? Tell us what's terrible about you. We'll tell you we love you. I mean, that's incredible in its own right. Yeah. But where else are you sort of like one action away from being on the outs? Like, that's an amazing thing to me too about AA. It's like you're clean, you're everybody's friend. All of a sudden you do what you say you do that everyone's there to do, and now people can't talk to you, or some people won't, or so it's just it's just another place with a lot of stakes,
Yeah, well, I applaud you for having the courage to be so equivocal about it and so unorthodox about it. And I think that's part of what I love so much about the book, that there's no orthodoxy at all. Tommy, I can see that we're gonna run out of some time and people want to ask
read a little more. You want me to read a little more?
No, yeah, but let's jump ahead to Jeffrey Kastenberg, because one of the most interesting things about this book to me is that there's only one real life character who you give a name to, and that's Jeffrey Kastenberg. Of course, I don't know him, I've never met him, but everybody knows who he is. And the other thing, the comic part of this book, is the relationship between screenwriters and the people who are going to give them bread. And
this guy, Adam Wood, my producer, is a funny character.
Yeah, no, he's a great, who becomes a junkie and is getting high. But why don't you, because this is probably the longest passage you're going to read, and I don't want to leave the Zoom without everybody getting to enjoy this. Why don't you read the passage about how a Hollywood writer makes a pitch in Hollywood and then jump to the introduction, so we get to see Jeffrey Katzenberg enter the novel, if you'd be kind enough to do that. So everybody put on their seat belt, because this is a hell of a ride.
Pitching movies is black magic. It's part preparation, part charisma, and part con. Some cats are famous for being so charming in the room, they could sell singing lessons to a deaf mute, but I wasn't one of them. I had to fully believe in what I was saying, and if any part of it struck me as false, I was sunk. In real life, I could lie my ass off, but when it came to the world of make-believe, I was honest as a Boy Scout. And then that's a thing where I first have to pitch to the preliminary guys. And then finally, so the real story of this also is, I had, because of my addiction and stuff, I had a pretty lean period. But me and Michael were the first writers on Shrek, and we're uncredited. And so so my big story with Shrek is I came up with this idea that, they love templates, and these animated movies should have a template of a real movie. And supposedly, Toy Story is the one with Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier. And so one day it just came to me, this should be Midnight Cowboy. And there was the donkey was on one page. I said, the donkey is Ratso Rizzo and Shrek is Midnight Cowboy. It was a one-person movie. And so I came up with this, and I never got credit. And I always thought, why doesn't Katzenberg hire me? I came up with the donkey. Like, it was literally like a 15-year burn of mine. And so when I got my chance to put it in a book and fictionalize it, I did. So that's the kind of story with it. All right. Conference rooms make me physically ill, and I can't remember anything good ever happening in one. You want your pitch to seem like a story around the campfire, but a conference room makes it like the deposition of a class action lawsuit. Even the walk over from the waiting area is like a stroll to the gallows. The psychotically pleasant assistant leading us to some sterile rectangle specifically built for men to say no in. Nick and I walk in. We're joking with Trino and the dumpy kid, but our laughter has the squashed uneasiness of doom. We're seated at a long horizontal table and asked if we'd like a beverage, the show business version of cigarette and blindfold. There are 3 chairs on our side and one on the other. That's the judgment chair, AKA Jeffrey's throne. At the moment it's empty, but there's a can of Diet Coke and a glass of 5 perfect ice cubes waiting for the king. I take a breath and look around for something to hold on to, something that isn't sleek, mirrored, or chrome. Trino and the dumpy kid have taken seats behind us against the wall. That way, if our pitch goes off the rails and explodes, they'll be far enough away to not get any of our failure on their clothes. I turn to Nick and say something about him feeling free to chip in when the double glass doors push open and there he is, the teeny little boy man with the too big head. Nick and I stand like we would for a dignitary, even though we're supposedly just shaking hands. Trino gets up and does the introductions. When he says, "This is Bobby Zorn," I wait for Jeffrey to say, "I know Bobby," or Bobby and I go back a long way. But he gives me nothing, not even a crumb. He just offers a vacant smile that says, "I don't remember you. And if I do, it's of no use to you now." But I'm not going down so easy. I look him in the eye and say, "It's good to see you, man." Like we have history together and both know it. But the words bounce off him like he's wearing a bulletproof vest. He sits down, pours his Diet Coke, and I watch it fall majestically over the perfect ice.
Well, now I'm changing my whole interpretation of the book, and now I think it's a series of jazz riffs. I was with my grandson earlier today, and we were in the car, and a Coltrane's Blue Train came on, and after they stated the theme, I told my grandson, Nino, wait till you hear Coltrane's intro to his solo, and that's what the 5 perfect ice cubes reminds me of. I mean, I think there's some permanently great riffs in this book. I'm going to ask you to read some more because I like hearing you more than our bullshit. Read the paragraph. Is one of my favorite paragraphs in the book about, I think it's on the architecture when you're going around LA and you're looking at houses.
Yeah.
Do you know the passage?
Yeah. I'll give a little piece of the connecting. Where is here? Yeah. And I'll connect it to this other piece.
Oh, okay.
Driving south on Wilton through the Tropic of Papusa and down into Craftsman Alley. This is my jugular vein for mid-city travel, a carotid artery that splits the town in half and gets me where I need to go, which is usually nowhere. I take the little curve on First and wait at the 3-way light. I've driven this particular stretch so many times, I know each house personally. The light blue with the 3-gabled roof and the brown trim, the beige with the glass enclosed porch and the oak door wide enough for an elephant, the brown and green with the rafter tails poking out under the eaves like oars on a Viking ship, and then that crazy gray number with the white Greek columns, like the builder started reading Plato halfway through and just couldn't help himself. No one walks the streets in this town, they drive. And when half your waking reality goes by between 25 and 40 miles an hour, the homes become the people, and your neighbors aren't men and women, but architecture. Craftsmen, mid-century, Spanish revival, those are the nationalities of LA, not Mexican, Korean, and Armenian. The homes are the soul of this city. The people themselves are just driving through.
That's great. I was thinking too of another line in the book that stuck with me, and tell me if I got it right. But I think what you say at some point, I always take the junkies' side.
I always side with the junkie.
I always side with the junkies. And the reason that hit me so hard is that part of what's really beautiful about the book is your love of junkies. In other words, your embrace, and of course, you having been a junkie, you went through the whole thing, but you didn't come out of it. It seems to me, if this book is any evidence of that, which I think it is, you came out of it with such great compassion and also appreciation of the junkie character. And in that regard, it reminds me of William Burroughs' Junkie, in that he's unapologetic.
One of my favorite lines in the book is when I see that kid who invites me to talk at the AA meeting, and we're laughing at each other, and I say, there's nothing better than being an ex junkie. You get to have lived the life, but you don't have to live it no more. And that really is how I feel about it. You know what I mean? It's a great life to have lived. It's not a great life to be living, but to have lived it is terrific, man. And it's rich. It's rich shadow world stuff.
The other thing that I think you do extremely well in this book is that there's two female characters in the book. One is living and one is dead, but you bring them, they both come to life, and they're sisters with, but there's also another character who's a who I love, but read the passage about Carla when you first describe her. Now, Carla, well, you'll tell everybody who she is.
Carla's the complete. She's the sort of the thing in the book that I made up to make the book happen. She's an addict who's died, and I dated. She's an addict, this fancy sort of half English, beautiful addict who's OD'd with this kid I know at the Snooty Fox, the South Central motel, and I dated her half sister. And the half sister, the whole book is about, calls me because she's heard I know the boy who was there when she OD'd, who left and has something that she wants, which turns out to be a whole different thing. But anyway, and then I have a history with Carla where she one day asked me to go with her to help her kick. I want to describe her in detail, do justice to who she was, and try to capture the singular hum that I felt coming off her cells, but I'm not sure that's doable with words. It was beyond her physical beauty. It was what was going on inside her, the weight of her inner life. It pulled in everything that wasn't bolted down. I tried to be all chill, but I couldn't not look at her. She carelessly demanded it. Just the way she brought the coffee cup to her mouth with both hands, like it was her first sip of water after a trip across the desert. Or how she caught my eye, little waif style, as she licked the chocolate icing from the foil of her $5 ring ding. And yes, the color of her mouth and that little space between her teeth, and the way she'd been marked by all she'd been through. She was better than gorgeous. She was battered to an imperfection that perfection can't touch. She just made sense to me, and so did how she'd gone about it. Life had presented us with its wounds and wonders, and we had both come up with the same solution, the suede soft self-hatred of junk.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful line. One other, I know you took it out, but I want to put it back in. Read, play this song, play that song. Let me hear it again, play it again. But just read that paragraph on 104 about Lupita, because that also to me was a beautiful description of a woman. Do you know the one I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It begins with "We stopped."
Yeah.
And just tell everybody just a tiny bit.
The kid I'm looking for,
Mm-hmm.
I tell a story about him and his ex-girlfriend, who's this, they're like a classic junkie couple.
Right.
I go to an NA meeting, and after I've told the story about her, she shows up and she tells me that she knows where he is. And then I go with her and she takes me, and she ends up wanting to go to COP, but she's at a meeting. And anyway, we have this interaction, and she leads me to Kyle, or to at least to his phone number. We stopped at the light at Catalina. There's a liquor store there that has one of those old school neon signs that makes drinking seem like a great American art form. The red glow from it was mixed up in Lupita's hair, which was cut in a jet black bob long enough to cover the tracks on her neck. She was wearing a vintage blue dress with a Peter Pan collar and a pair of low maroon Doc Martens with the yellow stitching like it was 1985. On a white girl, they'd have been cliche and dated. On a half Filipina dope fiend, they were ironic and beyond reproach.
I just want to say something that occurred to me in the last couple of days about this book, and then I would like you to read the last paragraph, and then we'll turn it over to other people to ask you questions. But you don't tell me what occurred to me. This is so strange. I can't believe this. So, as you know, I went to graduate school under this famous literary critic who had this notion that American literature is all about males wandering into the wilderness and escape the world of women and bond together. And, he talks about Huckleberry Finn and Jim and Natty Bumppo and Chinook and Ishmael and Queequeg and Moby Dick. And then it occurred to me, in this book, the couple who makes it, the couple who, and again, this is a spoiler, but it's not that kind of book, so I'm not worried about it being spoiled. The one couple that endures is the relationship between two men, the sponsor and the sponsee,
right,
whose love for one another has them escape the world, and you tell me if I'm crazy, escapes the world of chaos and misery and death and addiction, and they go flying off to wherever the fuck, Tuscany, wherever.
Right, if he makes it.
If he makes it, right, and there is some ambiguity on the airplane. But did you have Huckleberry? Were you on the raft with Huckleberry Finn and Jim?
I was just like, oh, I think maybe it can end this way. Like it was like, I was like going, well, how can I end this thing? Like, what do I do next? And it was just like, oh, maybe this happens, with me and Kyle, but I did. And it's interesting, a lot of people, certain people, it's funny, it was a little time. It does. I like how you're perceiving it, obviously, but people thought it was like rough. And then that the one bit of real heart was this relationship between me and Kyle. I don't particularly see it that way, but it's interesting. So yeah, I guess that's where the most tenderness is in the book.
Well, because it is about brotherly love. I mean, it is brotherly love that sustains and any event. We can talk about this.
I'll read the paragraph.
Yeah, but before you read the last paragraph of the book, I just want to remind everybody that the book begins on Wilshire Boulevard in the opening paragraph, and to show how you've done the tighten up on this book, it ends there. So
well, this isn't the exact ending, but at least it's close, right? I took Wilshire the whole way, from the garish $5 million condos of the Wilshire corridor through the William Morris midnight of Beverly Hills. I held my nose through the tar pit stink of Miracle Mile, past the green neon ghost of a Gaylord Hotel. I kept to my task until the moonlit ponds of MacArthur Park were small in the rear view, and there was nothing left but the second-rate skyscrapers of Figueroa and Grand. One long asphalt scar, containing the DNA of not just a city, but a century. 15.3 miles worth, and I didn't miss a light.
Well, anyway, man, congratulations. It's really a very, very beautiful book. So look at this. It's exactly a quarter till. We are exactly on time.
Good for you, David.
I don't know. But so whoever, I don't know how. I don't know. Mrs. Shiv, yeah, and take over.
Yes, yeah, good. I'm here to jump in. So, one, thank you for leading this conversation, David. Your questions were great, and I appreciated the depth of examination that you brought. And I just really enjoyed hearing the two of you talk.
Well, thank you.
So now to all of you who are joining us in the audience, if you have questions this evening, you can type them in the chat and we'll relay them from there. And I'll give you a little time to do that. And I will ask my question that I came prepared with, to give folks some time to put their thoughts down. Thinking especially about that last paragraph that you read, the city of Los Angeles is very clear and very vibrant in this book, as is its geography, its neighborhoods, its streets. When you were writing, did you spend any time kind of tracing these steps, driving that length of Wilshire, or did you use the LA that, was in your memory and in your imagination and kind of put things in places where they needed to be to make your story function?
Yeah, I really just grab things I know. I mean, it's funny, there's a lot, like, again, like my buddy who I did the movie with, TJ, all his copying was in the Valley, a lot in Van Nuys and a lot in North Hollywood. Mine happened to be in South Central with a lot of old Black men. So that was I always think, like, what am I uniquely qualified to do? What is my unique knowledge? You know what I mean? And, I did get lost driving the 134. Every time I went to DreamWorks, I got lost. So I put it in the book. I knew the hood, so I wrote about it. I just wrote about the things and the places I knew. And when you're a drug addict, you have to, in LA, you drive a lot. So, and when you're a screenwriter, you drive a lot for meetings. So I've just been on, like all of us, I've just been on the road for 40 years in this town and, paying attention.
Thanks. Anyone from the audience have questions they would like to ask? This is your opportunity.
If we're waiting for a chat thing, I can ask a question.
Yeah, please. Thank you, David.
Or I can stop if anybody. So, one of the things that's curious to me, Tommy, is that, okay, so this book has a happy ending, as happy as a book like this can possibly have. And your life, it took a happy turn in that you recovered, you did get a gig as a screenwriter, and you were able to make a living again. Do you think the circumstances of your life enabled you to make this book a comedy, which is to say a book with a happy ending?
No, because I started it. I mean, it's interesting. I started it like the new book. I've got some loot. I mean, all that stuff about being broke in this book comes from being broke.
Right.
I mean, I understood that. You know what I mean? What it was to have lost something. And
right.
then the last couple of years, I started to get it back. I don't think that helped me. I think it was going to be the same, but I mean, in fact, it was the desperation that made me do it in the first place. Like when I started it, things were pretty bleak. And I don't think I would have started it if things hadn't been bleak. It was the bleakness that got me to dig in and go, I'm going to do something with this bleakness, man. Well, good. No questions. All questions have been answered.
Here's a person with your hand up.
Oh.
Or not.
Sorry, I was trying to, hi, it's Lucinda. My name is Lucinda. So I just wanted to say to you two guys, what a really, really good question answer reading. I mean, I know you, Tommy, and this was just incredibly fun to watch. And thank you, David, for the way that you brought out the conversation. It was just so skillful. I mean, do I have a question? I've got 40 or 50 and I know the guy. So I'm not going to do that, but I really do feel like I wanted to say how much I enjoyed this event.
Nice.
There's John Taylor. Want to ask a question?
What was John saying?
Gotta get off mute.
What
Yeah.
happened?
John, you've got to turn off here.
There we go.
Here's
Can you hear
John.
me?
Oh, there I am.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
Tell me I love the beard.
Thank
Listen, man, I read this, I think in one of your early renditions of it, right? It's gone through a rewrite a couple times or something. And I was blown away because, I mean, all of it's just so intimate and so there's so much heart and there's so much soul in it. And the grasp you have with language as David would intimate, you know, it's music. It just flows over you and through you. I also, one of the things I was thinking about, I kept confusing your book with the movie. You know, I was thinking you, when you're talking about humor, I was thinking one of the most hilarious things I ever saw was in your movie when you tore the car apart looking for $30, you know, but, you know, I won't take a lot of your time, but I just really appreciate being notified, you know, David, you're going to do this and just keep it up, man. Just keep it up because you obviously got great talent.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks.
What do you know, John's, if I'm interrupting somebody, tell me, but John's question made me think of something that I did want to ask you about, Tommy, which was the relationship between the movie and the novel, because I'm not entirely clear. Was the movie made before you started the novel, or and it was completed and edited and out? So the movie was done.
Was done.
I see. And so it's really a two-part thing.
A little bit. Yeah.
I mean, because they are both autobiographical riffs.
Right.
With a bunch of
The
crazy
book is
people.
actually even more, in a way, autobiographical because me and, you know, I used mostly with, I'm sure, you know, Karen's on here with my ex-wife more, and I didn't run around with dudes. Those two guys who were in the car with me in the movie, that was more their thing, like men going out and hopping with their friends. I wasn't at all part of my life, but you know, the being an active addiction, that was that part. And then this book was about, as you're talking about, sort of post that, you know what I mean? And then sort of, you know, combining, I mean, that was a very limited thing. That was like a work day, a drug addict work day. This is my whole universe kind of.
I think was anyone good? Oh yes, Devin has her hand up, right?
I do. Well, I have to say it's been an unbelievable treat to sit in on a dialogue between you two gentlemen, and I'm such a fan of this book. I've read this book, Tommy, and it was so wonderful that David had you read so many exceptional passages. I mean, to me, it's like your descriptive powers are phenomenal. And you know, when I read it, I remember putting the book down after I read a passage, and I wish you could read this, but you probably can't locate it, and there may not be time. A passage where you describe a rug in the motel room. I think it's in Carla's motel. You know that passage I'm talking about? It's just like you take us into the grain of the rug and everything that's in there, and the entire history of the motel room told through the story of the rug. I mean, like, how many writers can do such a thing? So, but if I had to ask you a question, I would ask, so David mentioned, you know, the different genres, and I'm just wondering which, if you had to choose a genre, like which you identify with, yeah? Like jazz musician, screenwriter, director, actor, poet, if you had to put one at the top of the list, I'm wondering what you might choose. I mean, I know what I think, but I'm wondering how you would self-name.
A genre. Oh, you know, it's funny. That was a I don't.
I mean,
I don't really prefer. I mean, the poetry one, the language one is like in there, and it sort of guides everything. So when I made a record, it was about the language. When I wrote the movie, I mean, it was about language. But like, you know, so I'd say it's always writing. But my interest is sort of like, can I get a hold of something? Can I get some control of it? And can I make what matters to me matter to you? You know, that's just what matters to me. So I don't know, but But listen, being able to sit in your room and write as opposed to going out and making a movie. I mean, making a movie is like insane. You know what I mean? It's just the amount of other people involved and what it takes to wrangle that. So I would say the sort of most natural thing is to be able to sit down and just blow a little bit, you know, and I don't know how to sing. You know, I tried, you know, I can fake it, but you know, so I would say just writing poetry or prose now with some poetry in there.
Thank you.
You know, and that's going back to thinking about the overall kind of structure of the book. That's the other reason that I have all this respect for the book, because you could have easily had done landscape of LA 34 poems, you know, here's Koreatown, here's blah, blah, blah. But for you to take it and squeeze it all into a very demanding, predetermined structure, going back to Lulu's Back in Town, required great technical virtuosity. And I think,
I mean, we didn't read any dialogue. I mean, the funny thing about this book is
exactly,
a friend of mine read it and said, why don't you just make it a screenplay? It's all dialogue.
yeah.
I mean, it's all, the book is like 80%, 75% dialogue. We just chose those because it was easier to
Great
follow.
point.
So,
Right.
you know, I really thought to myself again with this idea of like, what are we each uniquely qualified to do? I was like, oh, I write poetry and I spent 30 years writing screenplays. So I can like,
Right.
I can make it a movie. I can tell a story. I've been doing it. So I thought I could combine these two things and that'll be my thing. You know what I mean? So screenwriting was a big part of it. You know what I mean? And I didn't want to shy away from being a screenwriter, you know, because that's LA too.
So Calvin has his hand up.
So we've got three folks, and I'm gonna let you know the order in which we'll hear your questions. So Pedrinho, and then Eric, and then Calvin, in terms of who raised their hand first. I will ask you to unmute in that order.
Pedrinho here. There's a British woman in this book that needs to be heard from, and without her there is no book, and you do her as well as anybody that I know. So do a little dialogue. Do the first call with Angie.
Oh, come on, man.
Come on, man. Come on, man.
Peter. All right, let me. I'll read a couple of lines.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Let me get there. It's right in the beginning. Okay. I reach for my little science speaker of Costa Rica when my phone starts to rattle on the table like a piece of bacon frying. It's not even 8, so it's either a bill collector or my ex-wife needing me to take Stanley to school. But the screen says Angie English. I was not expecting that. Something tells me this is a butt dial. Silence. I am both relieved and disappointed. Is that how you answer the phone these days, sweetie? No. So she had meant to call. Not usually, just not expecting to hear from you, and definitely not at 7:30 in the morning. I'm sorry, is it too early? You're usually up 6:30, aren't you? I was up before 6:30. I was up whole 6. She fake laughed, but it was a real fake laugh. How have you been, sweetie? Sweetie's been good. How's Miss Angie? I haven't had my coffee yet, so I don't really know. Yeah, just having mine now. You in America? Yeah. If I was, yes. And if I wasn't, I'd be Skyping, and you wouldn't be answering because you still don't know how to set your alert. There's something about a classy female British accent in the morning that really clears the sinuses. There you go.
Go for it, Eric. You see your hand up.
Eric has to turn off his. Eric, we can't hear you.
Luddites of the world unite. It's going to be hard. It might be tough. Eric just got Zoom today, so maybe you want to go to Calvin and come back to Eric.
Well, no, Eric's talking now. Maybe.
Yeah. I'll chat directly with Eric. Calvin, if you want to ask your question, I'll see if I can help figure out Eric's sound.
Hey, Tommy.
Hey,
Hey, David.
Hey, Calvin.
This has been amazing. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I really like the scene where at the bank when he's cashing the retainer. I think it's near the beginning. I'm not sure if that's in this book or if it made it into this draft. But
Yes, it's in there. Yeah.
I like the way that like in his own mind, he goes through he kind of runs the whole gamut, you know, like at one point it seems like a promising situation with the teller, and then it becomes not that.
Right. And it leads to him getting his ass.
Maybe could you perhaps read a little of that for us?
Tommy, actually, it was a paragraph which
Yes, and he runs into the production design person, I think.
loved. Or you could just read the one on the top of page 26 when you go into the Chase Bank on La Brea, but that's, you may have another one that you like more.
Okay. No, he's talking about, I step up to the window. Okay. I step up to the window and my teller is wearing a sky blue shirt that says Chase on it. I guess they wanted to seem like a member of their bowling team, not the robot employee of a soul-crushing financial Golgotha. Her name tag says Zamin, and she is done up in a way that only an Armenian girl would even try to pull off. Her top lip alone has enough pink gloss on it to frost a cake. And she isn't wearing rouge, she's been wounded by it. Every feature on her face is its own principality. From the swooping green eyes to the double bump nose to her innocent yet vicious mouth. I can't see her bottom half because of the teller window, but the swell of her Yerevan chest makes the bowling shirt as glorious as Joseph's coat.
Where's Yerevan?
That's the capital of Armenia.
Ah. Yeah, well done. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
I'm gonna try Eric one more time. And then, oh. No. All right. I can tell that Eric is unmuted, but we're still unfortunately unable to hear him. So I'll ask Cabral. And I'll see, Eric, if you can respond to me in the chat. That would be great.
Hi, Tommy. Hi.
Hi.
It's not really a question, but I just want to say that when I first met Tommy several years ago and he gave me something, I think it was actually a passage from this book to read. And I read it and I looked at him and I said, why aren't you famous? You need to be famous. You should be famous. And the more I've got to know him over the years, the more I think so. And to piggyback on what Devin said, that during COVID, Tommy had called me and said, I'm thinking of writing a new book, and I want you to read something I wrote you. I said, yes, send it. He didn't end up doing anything with that project, but he sent me a couple chapters of it. And in describing the tuna sandwich that his mother used to make him, I just started sobbing. And it
wasn't that. It wasn't that, but it was a tuna fish sandwich. But it was the opposite of that she used to make me. It was that we used to go to Chop Meat Charlie to a place and I'd eat a tuna sandwich with her there. Yeah.
Right, that you ate with him. But anyways, it was just like the subtlety and the nuance and just the way Tommy writes. And so what my main comment was that I think David's comment should be on the back of your new book, which is that Tommy Swerdlow's writing is poetry strung together into a narrative, or however you said it, David. But I think that should be on the back of your new book.
Thanks.
That's what I wanted to say.
That's nice.
All right. Eric, has your luck changed at all?
Eric, people need to hear you too, man. Eric is a friend of mine. He's an original member of the Watts Writers Workshop, where Bud Schulberg went down at the first riots in 1966 and said, anybody who's mad and wants to write, come with me. And a whole bunch of famous writers came out of it, a group of well-known writers, including the guy who did the Miles Davis autobiography. So that's a commercial for Eric, even if he can't talk.
Tell me, the English girl, does she live in Beverly Hills? She had a roommate. Is this the one where the guy comes out of the room naked?
That's Malibu. Yeah, that's Malibu, and her Scottish half brother.
Yeah,
comes out of the room naked.
Yeah.
Right.
Poetry is right on, Tommy.
Good, man.
That's what I thought when I read your book and a lot of your other writings that I've read. Just there. You know, still have them.
Well, I am very sorry that we couldn't figure out the audio for Eric to be able to ask his question as well. But I'm sorry to not get to hear from you this evening. But I want to thank everyone who joined us, all of you in the audience who are still showing up for Zoom events after, a year and a half of doing everything virtually. Thank you for being here tonight to support, wait, I'm prepared, to support Tommy Swerdlow and Straight Dope. There is a link in the chat where you can buy it online, or if you're local to Los Angeles, you can stop by Chevalier's and pick up a copy. And I want to especially thank David Ritz for joining us as our interlocutor for this evening. And then finally, our biggest thanks to Tommy Swordlow for sharing with us this evening his book and stories from his life, and just giving us all this wonderful opportunity. Thank you all for being here. If you tuned in late, if you want to watch it again, any of that, it will be available on our YouTube channel soon. So you can find it through our website, chevaliersbooks.com. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy.
Great, David. Terrific.